They told her she was worthless without his last name. They laughed when she signed the divorce papers with a trembling hand, accepting 0 alimony just to escape his torment. Everyone in that small town thought Brianna was finished. She walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back, while her ex-husband toasted champagne with his mistress. But karma has a funny way of keeping score. 6 months later, when he dragged her back to court to humiliate her one last time, he didn't expect the roar of engines overhead. He didn't expect the entire courtroom to freeze as she stepped off a Gulfstream G650, flanked by the city's most feared legal team. This is the story of how the woman they discarded came back as the woman they couldn't touch. Location: downtown Seattle, Washington. Date: October 14th, 2 p.m. The mahogany conference table in the law firm of Henderson and Associates was so polished you could see the reflection of Brianna's exhausted face in it. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles turning the color of ash. Across from her sat Preston. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Brianna had made in the last 3 years combined. Next to him sat Tiffany. She wasn't just the other woman anymore. She was the replacement. She was younger, louder, and currently snapping gum while scrolling through her phone, acting as if destroying a 10-year marriage was simply a boring errand she had to run before a nail appointment. "Well?" Preston's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. "We don't have all day, Brianna. Are you going to sign, or are you going to keep pretending you can afford to fight me?" Mr. Henderson, Preston's shark of a lawyer, slid the document across the table. It was thick, heavy with legalese that boiled down to one simple fact. Brianna would leave with nothing. No share of the tech company she had helped Preston build from their garage. No alimony. No claim to the house. "If you sign now," Mr. Henderson said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy, "Preston is willing to cover your legal fees for today. If you fight, he will bury you in litigation until you're living in a shelter." Brianna looked at Preston. She remembered the nights she stayed up coding the back end of his first website because he was too tired. She remembered selling her grandmother's jewelry to pay their rent when investors said no. She looked at the man who had once promised to protect her, now looking at her like she was a stain on his expensive shoes. "I just want out," Brianna whispered. Her voice was steady, despite the hurricane in her chest. "Speak up," Tiffany giggled, finally looking up from her phone. "God, Preston, she's so pathetic. How did you deal with this for a decade?" Preston didn't even reprimand her. He just tapped his Rolex. "Sign it, Brianna. Take your freedom and go. It's more than you deserve." Brianna picked up the cheap plastic pen provided by the firm. She didn't look at the assets she was forfeiting. Millions of dollars that were rightfully half hers. She knew the system. Preston had the money, the connections, and the judges in his pocket. Fighting him meant destruction. Leaving meant survival. She signed, Brianna Stiles. The moment the ink hit the paper, Preston snatched the document away, as if fearing she might burn it. "Finally," he exhaled, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Get out of my sight. And Brianna, don't come begging when you realize a degree in English literature doesn't pay the rent in this city." "Actually," Tiffany added, linking her arm through Preston's, "maybe we can hire her as a maid. We are going to need help with the new estate." They laughed. The sound echoed off the cold walls. Brianna stood up. She was wearing a simple beige dress worn at the hem. She grabbed her purse. She didn't scream. She didn't flip the table. She simply looked Preston in the eye. "You think you've won, Preston," she said, her voice dropping an octave, finding a steeliness she didn't know she possessed. "But you just set me free. Remember that." Preston scoffed. "Freedom is expensive, sweetheart, and you're bankrupt." He led Tiffany out of the room, leaving Brianna alone in the silence of the high-rise office. She walked to the elevator, her steps heavy. When she stepped out onto the rainy streets of Seattle, she had exactly $42 in her bank account and nowhere to go. She sat on a bench near the ferry terminal, watching the grey water churn. She pulled out her phone and dialed the only number she had left. "Auntie May?" she choked out. "I signed. It's over. Can I come home?" Location: Austin, Texas time. Jump. 4 months later. The humidity in Austin was different from the rain in Seattle. It was heavy, clinging to your skin like a second layer. Brianna wiped sweat from her forehead as she balanced a tray of iced teas and burgers. She was working at Diner 66, a roadside spot popular with truckers and locals. It was a far cry from the corporate galas she used to organize for Preston, but it was honest work. She was living in a small studio apartment above her Aunt May's garage, saving every penny. She had stopped using the name Stiles. She went by her maiden name, Brianna Ford. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the old man came in. He looked disheveled, wearing a faded fishing hat and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. He sat in the corner booth, coughing slightly. Most of the waitresses ignored him. He didn't look like a tipper. Brianna approached him with a warm smile. "Afternoon, sir. Can I get you something cold to drink? It's a scorcher out there." The man looked up, surprised by her kindness. "Just a water, please. I'm afraid I forgot my wallet in my truck, and I'm feeling a bit lightheaded. I just need to sit for a moment." Other customers were looking at him with suspicion. The manager, a stout man named Rick, was already walking over, looking ready to kick the old man out for loitering. Brianna intercepted Rick. "I've got table 4, Rick. He's a regular." She lied smoothly. She turned back to the man. "I'm putting in an order for the soup of the day and a lemonade. My treat. You look like you need the salt." The man's eyes watered. "I couldn't miss—" "Brianna," she said, placing a napkin down. "And you can. Eat. You remind me of my grandfather." The man ate slowly. His hands shook. Brianna checked on him between serving other tables, refilling his glass, making sure he was okay. They chatted briefly. He told her his name was Nathaniel. He talked about his garden, about how lonely it was since his wife passed. He asked Brianna about her life. For the first time in months, Brianna opened up, not about the money, but about the betrayal. "I trusted the wrong person," she admitted, wiping down the table. "I built an empire with a man who convinced me I was just the help. Now I'm starting over. But I'm studying at night. I'm learning corporate law. I figured if I can't beat them with money, I'll beat them with the book." Nathaniel listened intently, his sharp blue eyes studying her. "Corporate law? That's a tough field for a late starter." "I have plenty of motivation," Brianna said, her jaw tightening as she thought of Preston's laugh. "I'm good at finding patterns. I found all the loopholes in my ex's contracts. I didn't have the voice to point them out back then. I won't make that mistake again." When Nathaniel left, he left a note on a napkin. "Thank you for the soup. You have a kindness that is rare, and a fire that is rarer. Don't let the fire burn out the kindness." There was no tip, just the note. Rick, the manager, scoffed. "Told you, waste of a table." Brianna pocketed the note. He needed it more than I did. 2 weeks later, a black sedan pulled up to the diner. A man in a sharp suit stepped out and asked for Brianna Ford. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "No, Miss Ford," the man said. He handed her a thick envelope. Mr. Nathaniel Wright requests your presence. Wright? Brianna frowned. The old man with the fishing hat? The courier smiled thinly. Mr. Wright is the founder of Wright Aeronautics. He owns half the skyline in Dallas. He would like to discuss a job offer. He says he needs someone who can spot loopholes. Brianna stood frozen in the parking lot. The old man wasn't a drifter. He was a billionaire. Location: Dallas, Texas, Wright Aeronautics headquarters. Time jump: 3 months later. 7 months post-divorce. Brianna's life had transformed. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a junior compliance officer at Wright Aeronautics. It turned out Nathaniel hadn't handed her a charity job. He had given her a brutal entrance exam, which she passed with a score that shocked the HR department. She was making good money. She had her own apartment. She was safe. But Preston wasn't done. She was sitting in her glass-walled office, reviewing a merger contract, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? You thought you could hide in Texas? The voice made her blood turn to ice. It was Preston. What do you want, Preston? The divorce is finalized. You got everything. Not everything, Preston hissed. My auditors found a discrepancy. A hidden account. You siphoned money off the top before you left, didn't you? That's how you're affording a life in Dallas. I saw your LinkedIn update. Compliance officer, please. You're uneducated trash. I didn't steal a dime, Preston. You know that. I know what I can prove. Preston laughed. And guess what? I'm suing you. Fraud, embezzlement, and breach of our NDA. I'm going to bleed you dry, Brianna. I'm going to make sure you never work in a corporate office again. I want you back in the gutter where you belong. You're lying, Brianna said, standing up, her hand gripping the desk. You're just mad because the stock price dropped after I left. I saw the news. Your back-end code is failing, isn't it? You don't know how to fix the architecture I built. Silence. She had hit a nerve. See you in court, Brianna, Preston snarled. Seattle, Monday morning. If you don't show, I'll get a default judgment and garnish your wages for the rest of your miserable life. The line went dead. Brianna sank into a chair. A lawsuit. She had a job, but she didn't have defend against a multi-millionaire money. Preston would drag this out for years. He would destroy her reputation at her new job. She felt the tears coming, the old panic rising. Bad news. She spun around. Nathaniel Wright was standing in her doorway. He wasn't wearing the fishing hat today. He was in a three-piece suit that commanded respect from the air itself. Brianna quickly wiped her eyes. Mr. Wright, It's personal. I might need to take a leave of absence. Maybe resign. Resign? Nathaniel walked in and sat on the edge of her desk. Why would my best new compliance officer resign? My ex-husband, Brianna admitted, looking down. He's suing me. He's wealthy, powerful, and petty. He wants to ruin me. I can't bring that kind of heat to this company. Nathaniel listened as she explained the situation, the false accusations, the history, the upcoming court date in Seattle. When she finished, Nathaniel stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Dallas skyline. He wants you in Seattle on Monday? Nathaniel asked. Yes, sir. But commercial flights are fully booked because of the tech convention. And Brianna, Nathaniel interrupted, turning to face her with a glint in his eye that terrified his competitors. Do you remember what you told me at the diner? That you would beat them with the book? Yes. Good. Because you're not going to Seattle alone, and you certainly aren't flying commercial. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Get the G650 ready, and call the Abernathy and Stout legal team. Yes, the whole team. Tell them we have a case in Seattle. We're going to war." He looked at Brianna. "Pack your bags, kid. We're going to court." Location: Dallas Love Field. Private hangar 4. Date: Sunday, October 19th, 6:00 p.m. The sky over Dallas was a bruised purple, the sun setting behind a wall of storm clouds, but inside the private hangar of Wright Aeronautics, the lighting was crisp, clinical, and expensive. Brianna stood at the base of the stairs leading up to the Gulfstream G650. She was clutching the handle of her carry-on bag so tightly her knuckles were white. She felt like an imposter. Just a few months ago, she was scraping gum off the underside of tables at Diner 66. Now she was staring at a machine that cost $65 million, waiting for her to board. "Don't hesitate, Brianna." Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Fear is what they count on. Preston expects you to walk into that courtroom shaking. He expects you to be the same woman who signed those papers to escape him. If you walk up these stairs like you belong here, you've already won half the battle." Brianna took a deep breath. She smoothed the skirt of her suit, a charcoal wool blend Nathaniel had insisted his stylist procure for her. It was tailored to perfection, hugging her frame in a way that screamed power, not desperation. She nodded, lifted her chin, and ascended the stairs. Inside, the jet was unlike anything she had ever seen. It smelled of rich mahogany and fresh espresso. The seats were upholstered in cream leather that looked soft enough to melt into. But it wasn't a party plane. It was a mobile command center. Already seated at a conference table in the center of the fuselage were 3 people who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. "Brianna," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the group. "Meet your shield and your sword, the litigation team from Abernathy and Stout." A woman with silver hair cut into a sharp bob stood up first. Her glasses were perched on the end of her nose, and her eyes were terrifyingly intelligent. "Ms. Ford, I'm Eleanor Vance, senior partner. I specialize in forensic accounting and asset recovery. Correction, Vance is a band name. I will use Eleanor Graves. I'm Eleanor Graves, senior partner." Next to her was a man with shoulders like a linebacker and a suit that struggled to contain them. "I'm Attorney Fairbanks. I handle the intimidation tactics. When they try to bully you, I step in." The third was a younger man, typing furiously on a laptop. "Timothy, I'll be handling the digital forensics. We're already scrubbing the metadata on the files Preston submitted to the court." Brianna shook their hands, feeling a surge of emotion. "Thank you. All of you. I can't believe this is happening." "Don't thank us yet," Eleanor said, her voice dry. "Sit down. We have a 4-hour flight to Seattle, and we have 10 years of financial history to deconstruct." As the jet engines roared to life, pressing Brianna back into the plush leather seat, the reality set in. She wasn't just flying. She was ascending. Below her, the lights of Dallas faded away. Once they reached cruising altitude, the atmosphere shifted from luxury to brutal efficiency. Timothy projected a hologram of the court documents onto a screen. "Here's Preston's play," Eleanor explained, pointing a laser at the digital document. "He's claiming that during the last year of your marriage, you diverted funds from the maintenance budget of his company into a private offshore account. He has receipts, bank transfer logs, everything. It looks damning." Brianna's heart hammered against her ribs. "But I didn't. The maintenance budget was for the server upgrades. We spent that money on the new cooling systems for the data center." "We know," Timothy said without looking up. But Preston altered the ledger. He deleted the invoices for the cooling systems and replaced them with dummy transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands under the name B. Ford. "He framed me," Brianna whispered, horror washing over her. He really wants to send me to jail. He doesn't want you in jail, Nathaniel interjected from the sofa where he was sipping scotch. He wants you compliant. He wants you to settle. He's betting that when you see these fake documents, you'll panic and agree to pay him back the stolen money plus interest, effectively putting you in debt to him forever. It's a control tactic. Attorney Fairbanks cracked his knuckles. Standard narcissist playbook. Destroy the victim's credibility so they can't speak out. So what do we do? Brianna asked, looking at the team. If he forged the documents, it's my word against his. Eleanor smiled. It was a shark's smile. Not exactly. See, Preston made a mistake. He forgot that you wrote the original back-end code for his company's finance system, didn't he? Yes, Brianna nodded. I built the kernel in 2018. And like any good developer, Timothy said, finally looking up with a grin, you left a backdoor audit log. A ghost log that records every change made to the ledger, even the ones the admin tries to delete. Preston doesn't know it exists because he never bothered to learn how his own product worked. Brianna's eyes widened. She remembered. Late nights, coffee stains, lines of code. She had built a redundancy feature just in case the system crashed, a way to recover lost data. She never thought she would use it to recover her life. We're going to access that ghost log in court, Eleanor said. We're going to show the judge exactly when Preston deleted the real invoices and when he forged the fake ones. We aren't just going to win the defense, Brianna. We're going to counter-sue for malicious prosecution, defamation, and fraud. And, Nathaniel added, swirling his glass, we're going to take back what you signed away 4 months ago. The company isn't his. It's marital property built on your code. We're going for 50%, plus damages. Brianna looked out the window at the dark clouds drifting by. For the first time in a year, the knot of anxiety in her stomach loosened. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the architect of her own rescue. Get some sleep, Brianna, Nathaniel said softly. You need to look fresh. Tomorrow, we don't just walk into court. We make an entrance. Location, Boeing Field, King County International Airport. Seattle date, Monday, October 20th, 8:30. Seattle was living up to its reputation. A relentless, grey drizzle blanketed the city, turning the streets into slick mirrors reflecting the gloomy sky. At the King County Superior Court, Preston stood under the awning of the entrance, checking his watch. He looked impeccable in a navy Italian suit, but his face was twisted in a sneer. Tiffany was beside him, shivering in a dress that was too short for the weather, holding a Starbucks cup. She's late, Preston muttered. Probably took the Greyhound. It broke down, or maybe she just realized she's beaten and stayed in Texas. I hope she comes, Tiffany said, checking her makeup in her compact mirror. I want to see her face when the judge reads the charges. Do you think she'll cry? She always looked so ugly when she cried. She'll beg, Preston said with satisfaction. That's what she does. She'll beg me to drop the suit, and I'll make her sign a confession first. Preston's lawyer, a sleazy man named Mr. Schofield, chuckled. It's a slam dunk, Preston. She has no representation. She's probably going to ask for a public defender. We'll eat her alive by lunch. Just then, a low rumble began to vibrate through the air. It wasn't the usual sound of commercial traffic from SeaTac. It was closer, louder. People on the sidewalk stopped and looked up. A sleek, black convoy of 3 Cadillac Escalades was turning the corner, flanked by 2 police motorcycles with lights flashing. Who is that? Tiffany asked, squinting. The governor. Maybe a diplomat, Schofield mused, or a tech CEO. The convoy didn't pass the courthouse. It slowed down. The motorcycles blocked traffic, creating a clear path to the curb right in front of where Preston and Tiffany were standing. The lead SUV stopped. A massive security guard in a black suit with an earpiece stepped out. He didn't look at Preston. He opened a large black umbrella and moved to the rear door of the second vehicle. The door opened. First, a pair of black Louboutin heels hit the wet pavement. Then, a figure emerged. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that looked like it was woven from silk and steel. Her hair was styled in sleek, natural waves that defied the humidity. She wore oversized dark sunglasses, despite the lack of sun. Preston dropped his phone. It was Brianna. But it wasn't the Brianna he knew. The slump in her shoulders was gone. The hesitation in her step was vanished. She radiated an aura of wealth that made Preston's expensive suit look like a costume. Behind her, Nathaniel Wright stepped out, buttoning his jacket. He looked around the gloomy Seattle street with a look of mild amusement. "Is that—" Preston choked. "Is that Nathaniel Wright, the aerospace billionaire?" "Why is he with her?" Tiffany screeched, her voice cracking. Brianna didn't even look at them. She turned to the third SUV, from which Eleanor Graves, Attorney Fairbanks, and Timothy emerged, carrying sleek metal briefcases. They formed a phalanx around her. Preston stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Brianna, what is this? Who paid for this rental circus?" Brianna paused. She slowly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were clear, cold, and focused. She looked at Preston, not with fear, but with the indifference one might show a bug on a windshield. "Excuse me," Brianna said, her voice smooth and projecting clearly over the rain. "You're blocking my path to the courtroom." You think this intimidates me?" Preston spluttered, stepping into a personal space. "You embezzling little—" Before Preston could finish the sentence, the large security guard intercepted him. He didn't shove Preston. He simply occupied the space where Preston wanted to be, forcing the man to stumble back into a puddle. "Step back, sir," the guard said, in a voice like gravel. "She's my wife. Well, ex-wife," Preston yelled. "She is the plaintiff in a countersuit," Eleanor Graves interjected, stepping up. "And I am her attorney. Any further attempt to harass my client outside of the courtroom will be met with an immediate restraining order and a motion for sanctions. Do I make myself clear?" Preston looked at Eleanor, then at the wall of lawyers, then at the G650 pin on Nathaniel's lapel. He looked at Tiffany, who was staring open-mouthed at Brianna's handbag, a limited edition Birkin that Tiffany had been on a wait list for 3 years. "See you inside, Preston," Brianna said. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked up the courthouse steps, her heels clicking a rhythm of war on the stone. Inside the courthouse lobby, the scene was chaotic. The arrival of the convoy had drawn attention. People were whispering, "Is that a celebrity?" "That's the Wright Aeronautics team." "Who is the woman?" Brianna walked through the metal detectors. As she gathered her bag, a young court clerk looked at her ID. "Brianna Ford?" the clerk asked, looking at the docket. "I have you listed as pro se. Representing yourself?" "No," Brianna said, gesturing to the army of suits behind her. "There's been an update. I've retained counsel." "I see," the clerk gulped. I'll update the judge." As they waited for the elevator, Nathaniel leaned in. How did that feel? Brianna looked at her reflection in the elevator doors. She saw a black woman who had been told to be small, to be quiet, to be grateful for scraps, and she saw the woman she was now. It felt, Brianna whispered, a small smile playing on her lips, like the first breath of air after drowning. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the 3rd floor. The hallway to courtroom 4B stretched out ahead of them. At the end of the hall, Preston and Schofield were arguing intensely, their confidence visibly shaken. "Game time," Fairbanks said, adjusting his tie. "Remember, Brianna, Don't say a word unless the judge asks you directly. Let us be the dogs. You just hold the leash." They marched down the hall. As they passed the other benches, heads turned. The energy shifted. This wasn't going to be a divorce hearing anymore. It was going to be a public execution of Preston's ego. They entered the courtroom. It was an old room, smelling of wood polish and dust. The bailiff called out, "All rise." Judge Whittaker entered. He was an older man, known for being grumpy on Monday mornings. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. "Case number 49204, Judge Whittaker grumbled. "Preston Styles versus Brianna Ford. Matters of embezzlement and contract breach." He looked up. On the left, Preston and Schofield sat. Schofield looked nervous. On the right, Brianna sat, flanked by 4 of the most expensive lawyers in the country and a billionaire industrialist in the gallery. The judge blinked. He looked at Schofield, then back at Brianna's team. "Mr. Schofield," the judge said dryly, "it appears the defense is adequately prepared." "Your Honor," Eleanor Graves stood up, her voice ringing out like a bell. "We are not just the defense. We are filing an emergency motion to dismiss based on fabricated evidence, and we are entering a cross-complaint for corporate fraud involving the misappropriation of marital assets." Preston slammed his hand on the table. "Objection. She's lying." "Sit down, Mr. Styles," Judge Whittaker barked. He turned his gaze to Eleanor. "Fabricated evidence? That is a serious accusation, Counselor." "We have proof, Your Honor," Eleanor said, gesturing to Timothy, who was already connecting his laptop to the court's display system. "And we brought the architect of the system to explain it." Brianna locked eyes with Preston across the aisle. He was sweating. The real trial had just begun. Location: King County Superior Court, Courtroom 4B. Date: Monday, October 20th, 10:15 a.m. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the projector fan. A large screen had been lowered, displaying a complex grid of financial transactions. Preston Styles was gripping the edge of his table so hard his knuckles were white. He leaned over to his lawyer, Mr. Schofield, and hissed, "What are they doing? You said she didn't have the files. You said you wiped the server." "I did," Schofield whispered back, sweat beading on his upper lip. "I had our IT guys format the drives 3 times. There is no way she has the original data." Judge Whittaker peered over his spectacles. "Miss Graves, you may proceed." Eleanor Graves stood tall, smoothing her blazer. She walked to the center of the room, commanding attention like a conductor before an orchestra. "Your Honor," Eleanor began, her voice steady. "Mr. Stills has accused my client, Brianna Ford, of embezzling $450,000 from the company Stills Tech in March of this year. He has provided Exhibit A, a bank ledger showing transfers to an offshore account." She pointed to the screen. "This is what Mr. Styles submitted to the court." The screen showed the transfers. They looked official. "However," Eleanor continued, turning to face Preston directly, "Mr. Styles made a critical error. He assumed that because he owned the company, he understood the company. He forgot that the proprietary software running his entire financial back-end was written by the woman he divorced." Preston scoffed. "She wrote that code 5 years ago. It's outdated." "Is it?" Eleanor smiled. "I'd like to call my client, Brianna Ford, to the stand to explain the architecture of the system." Brianna stood up. She walked to the witness stand, her heels clicking softly. She took the oath, her hand steady. She sat down and looked out at the courtroom. She saw Tiffany in the back row, chewing her lip nervously. She saw Nathaniel Wright in the gallery, giving her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Ms. Ford," Eleanor asked, "can you explain what a shadow ledger is?" Brianna leaned into the microphone. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of an expert. When I built the core architecture for Stills Tech, Brianna explained, I knew security was paramount. I created a redundancy protocol. Essentially, every time an admin user, like Preston, makes an edit to the financial logs, the system doesn't just overwrite the data. It creates a hidden, read-only copy of the original entry, stamped with a hash key that cannot be altered. We call it a ghost log. Preston's face went pale. He stood up. Objection. She's making this up. There's no such thing. Overruled, Judge Whittaker snapped. Sit down, Mr. Stills. I want to hear this. Brianna continued, her eyes locking on Preston's. Mr. Stills deleted the invoices for the server cooling systems and replaced them with fake transfers to a Cayman Islands account. He thought hitting delete made the original invoices vanish, but the ghost log captured the moment he made the edit. It recorded his IP address, his login credentials, and the exact timestamp, October 12th at 2:45 a.m. Show us, Eleanor said. Timothy, the forensic expert, typed a command. The screen flickered. The official ledger dissolved, replaced by a black screen with neon green text. System audit trail. Immutable user. Admin and Preston action. Overwrite original entry. 450,000. Vendor. Arctic Cooling Solutions. New entry. 450,000. Transfer. Account. 88829. Cayman. The courtroom gasped. It was undeniable. The text on the screen proved not only Brianna's innocence, but Preston's deliberate fraud. He didn't just frame me, Brianna said, her voice cutting through the noise. He committed perjury. He submitted forged documents to this court to destroy my reputation, because I asked for a divorce. Schofield, Preston's lawyer, started packing his briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Preston, I can't argue against metadata. You lied to me. Fix this, Preston screamed, losing his composure entirely. I pay you to fix this. Mr. Stiles. Judge Whittaker banged his gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt. Eleanor Graves stepped forward for the kill. Your Honor, not only do we move for an immediate dismissal of the plaintiff's claims, but we would like to address our countersuit. Since Mr. Stiles has used company resources to commit fraud against a co-founder, he has violated the morality clause of the corporate charter, a charter he signed. Eleanor picked up a document. According to the bylaws Brianna wrote, any executive court defrauding the company forfeits their voting shares. Since these shares are marital assets that were hidden during the divorce settlement, we are laying claim to 60% of Stiles Tech, effective immediately. Preston looked like he was having a heart attack. You can't take my company. I built it. You didn't build it, Preston, Brianna said from the stand. I built the code. You just sold it. And today, the product is recalling the salesman. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of absolute defeat. Tiffany, in the back row, stood up quietly. She looked at Preston, who was sweating and shaking, and then at Brianna, who looked like a queen. Tiffany grabbed her purse and slipped out the back door without a word. Preston was alone. Location: King County Superior Court. Courtroom 4B date: Monday, October 20th, 10:45 a.m. The silence that filled Courtroom 4B was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. On the large projector screen, the glowing neon text of the ghost log remained frozen, a digital tombstone for Preston Stiles's reputation. System audit trail. Immutable user, admin Preston action, overwrite. Judge Whittaker stared at the screen for a long, uncomfortable minute. The only sound in the room was the hum of the hard drive and the ragged, shallow breathing of Preston Styles. The tech mogul who had walked in with the swagger of a king was now slumped in his chair, his expensive Italian suit looking suddenly too large for his shrinking frame. The judge slowly took off his reading glasses and folded them on the bench. He turned his gaze toward the defense table. He didn't look at Mr. Schofield, the lawyer. He looked directly at Preston. "Mr. Styles," Judge Whittaker said. His voice was dangerously low, a rumble of thunder before the strike. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many things. I have seen bitter divorces. I have seen corporate greed. But rarely have I seen such a flagrant, clumsy, and malicious attempt to use this court as a weapon to bludgeon a former spouse." Preston tried to stand, his legs shaking. "Your Honor, I can explain. It was a glitch. The system is old. Brianna wrote it years ago. She—" "Sit down." The judge's shout cracked through the air like a whip. Preston collapsed back into his chair, as if his strings had been cut. "You will not insult my intelligence, and you will certainly not insult the intelligence of this court," Judge Whittaker continued, his face reddening. "The metadata is clear. You didn't just hide assets, sir. You manufactured evidence. You forged bank documents. You perjured yourself under oath, and you did it all to deny a woman her fair share of a company she helped build." The judge turned to the court reporter. "Let the record show that the plaintiff's evidence, Exhibit A, is hereby stricken and ruled as a forgery." He then turned his attention to Eleanor Graves. Brianna watched her lawyer stand up. Eleanor didn't look triumphant. She looked efficient. She was a surgeon who had just located the tumor. "Ms. Graves," the judge said, "regarding your cross-complaint and the motion for asset seizure." "Yes, Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the few spectators sat in awe. "We are invoking Article 4, Section 2 of the Styles Tech Corporate Charter. The Morality and Governance Clause. It states that any executive officer found to have committed fraud, embezzlement, or perjury that endangers the company's standing is subject to immediate removal from the board of directors, and their Class A voting shares are to be placed in a constructive trust." Eleanor walked to the bench and handed up a leather-bound document. "Furthermore, since these shares were acquired during the marriage, and their value was fraudulently concealed during the initial divorce proceedings, we argue that the prenuptial agreement is null and void due to duress and fraud. We are asking for the reinstatement of marital asset division. Brianna Ford is entitled to 50% of the total stock. Combined with the penalty shares from the fraud clause, my client will hold a controlling interest of 60%. Preston let out a strangled noise, something between a sob and a laugh. 60%? That's hostile. That's a takeover. You can't give her my company." Judge Whittaker began to write. The sound of his pen scratching against the paper was the loudest noise in the world to Preston Styles. "Mr. Styles," the judge said without looking up, "I am not giving her your company. You gave it to her. You gave it to her the moment you decided to delete those invoices at 2:45 a.m. on October 12th. The judge slammed the gavel. "In the matter of Styles versus Ford, the plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice. Regarding the cross-complaint, ruling is found in favor of the defendant, Brianna Ford. The prenuptial agreement is voided. A forensic accounting team will be appointed to audit Styles Tech immediately. Until that audit is complete, all of Mr. Styles's personal and business assets are frozen." Preston gasped. "Frozen? How am I supposed to?" "And," the judge interrupted, his eyes hard as flint, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office. Mr. Stills, I suggest you don't leave town. You are likely facing criminal charges for perjury and fraud. Bailiff, please escort the plaintiff out of my courtroom." The The gavel banged one last time. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot ending a life. Preston sat frozen. His lawyer, Mr. Schofield, was already packing his briefcase with frantic speed. Schofield snapped his latches shut and stood up. "Where are you going?" Preston whispered, grabbing Schofield's sleeve. "Do something! Appeal!" Schofield yanked his arm away, looking at Preston with pure disgust. "I'm not filing an appeal, Preston. I'm filing a motion to withdraw as your counsel. You lied to me. You made me suborn perjury. I'll be lucky if I don't get disbarred for this. Don't call my office." Schofield stormed out, leaving Preston alone at the large oak table. On the other side of the aisle, there was no cheering. There were no high fives. It was the quiet satisfaction of professionals who had done their job. Nathaniel Wright leaned forward from the gallery and placed a hand on Brianna's shoulder. "Breathe, kid. It's done." Brianna let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 10 years. She looked across the aisle at the man who had tormented her. He looked small. He looked ordinary. The monster had turned out to be just a man in a suit. "Let's go," Brianna said softly to Eleanor. "I want to smell the fresh air." They gathered their files. As Brianna stood, she smoothed the skirt of her cream suit. She didn't look back at Preston. She walked down the center aisle, her head held high, the click of her heels sounding like a victory march. The hallway of echoes. As they stepped into the hallway, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive wood and dust of the courtroom gave way to the cold marble of the courthouse corridor. Attorney Fairbanks loosened his tie slightly. I have to say, seeing his face when the ghost log appeared, that was a highlight of my career, and I've been practicing for 20 years. Timothy, the tech expert, chuckled as he closed his laptop bag. He really thought hitting delete was the end of it. It's almost poetic. His arrogance was the bug in the system. It wasn't just arrogance, Eleanor said, checking her watch. It was underestimation. He never saw Brianna as a threat. He saw her as an appliance, something he owned. She turned to Brianna. "How does it feel to be the owner now?" Brianna stopped near the elevator banks. She looked at her reflection in the polished metal doors. She saw the lines of worry that had plagued her for months beginning to fade. "It feels heavy," Brianna admitted, "but a good heavy, like carrying a shield instead of a chain." "We have paperwork to file," Eleanor said, ever the pragmatist. "The transfer of shares will take about 48 hours. By Wednesday, you will be the majority shareholder of Styles Tech. You'll have the power to appoint the board. You'll have the power to fire the CEO. Brianna's eyes widened slightly. "Fire him? He's an employee now," Nathaniel pointed out, buttoning his jacket. "An employee who just committed fraud against the company. If you keep him on, you're liable. You have to fire him, Brianna. It's just business." Just business. The same words Preston had used when he told her he was hiding assets. "It's just business, honey. You wouldn't understand." "I understand perfectly," Brianna said, a steeliness entering her voice. "Let's get to the cars." The confrontation on the steps. They exited the courthouse into the cool Seattle afternoon. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the grey clouds that were breaking apart to reveal patches of blue. The air smelled of wet concrete and pine. The convoy of 3 black SUVs was idling at the curb, engines purring, a wall of security waiting to whisk them away. Brianna paused on the top step, taking a deep lungful of air. For the first time in months, she didn't feel hunted. "Brianna, wait, please!" The voice came from behind them. It was ragged, desperate, stripping away all dignity. Brianna didn't turn around initially. She heard the frantic slapping of leather shoes on the wet stone steps. Preston Styles burst through the courthouse doors, He was a mess. His tie was undone, his hair was wild, and his face was slick with sweat. He looked like a man who had been running from a fire only to realize he was burning from the inside out. The large security guard, the one who had intercepted him earlier, stepped forward instantly, his hand raised. "Sir, stay back." No, I need to talk to her," Preston shouted, trying to push past the guard, but bouncing off the man's chest like a child. "Brianna, tell him to let me through. We're family," Brianna signaled to the guard. "It's okay, David. Let him speak." She turned slowly. She stood 3 steps above him, forcing him to look up at her. The dynamic had physically shifted. He was below her now. "Family?" Brianna asked, her voice calm and carrying over the sound of the traffic. "You divorced your family, Preston. You sued your family. You tried to bankrupt your family." Preston wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes darted around, looking at Nathaniel, looking at the lawyers, looking for any ally he could find. He found none. "I panicked," Preston stammered. I was under a lot of pressure. The investors, the board. They wanted me to be ruthless. It wasn't me. You know me, Bri. You know the real me. The guy who bought you ice cream when you were coding late at night. Remember?" Brianna looked at him with a pity that was far worse than anger. "I remember a man who used my code to build a fortune and then told me I wasn't smart enough to share it. I remember a man who replaced me with a mistress the second the money started rolling in." "Tiffany is gone," Preston cried out. "She left me. She walked out the back door. She was a mistake, a gold digger. You were the real one. We can fix this. Listen, don't take the company. Please, it's my identity. Without Styles Tech, I'm nobody." He took a step up, his hand reaching out. "I'll give you a seat on the board. We can run it together, like we planned in the garage. Partners. Just don't liquidate me. Don't fire me." Brianna stared at his outstretched hand. It was the same hand that had snatched the pen away from her 4 months ago. "Partners," she repeated, tasting the word. "You had a partner, Preston. You had a wife who would have walked through fire for you. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a stepping stone." She took a step down, closing the distance, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You said earlier that freedom is expensive. You were right. It cost me everything I had to leave you. And now it's going to cost you everything you have to realize what you lost." "Brianna, please," Preston sobbed, tears finally spilling over, mixing with the sweat on his face. "I have nothing. The accounts are frozen. Schofield quit. I can't even pay for a cab. How am I supposed to get home?" Brianna looked at the convoy of luxury SUVs. She looked at the billionaire standing patiently by the door of the lead vehicle. Then she looked back at Preston. "You can walk," she said. "It's good for clarity." She reached into her purse. Preston's eyes lit up for a second, thinking she was reaching for a checkbook or cash, or maybe a phone to call him a ride. Brianna pulled out a single, cheap plastic pen, the one she had accidentally kept from the law firm the day she signed the divorce papers. She had carried it as a reminder of her lowest moment. She pressed the pen into Preston's chest pocket. "And keep this," she said. "Use it to sign your unemployment papers. I hear the market is tough for CEOs with fraud convictions." She turned her back on him. "Brianna!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You can't do this. I made you." She stopped one last time, looking over her shoulder with a cold, dazzling smile. "No, Preston, you didn't make me. You just distracted me. Now I'm finally back to work." She descended the steps and walked toward the convoy. Nathaniel opened the rear door of the SUV. "Brutal," Nathaniel commented quietly as she climbed in. "But necessary." "He needed a reality check," Brianna said, sliding across the leather seat. I just gave him a reality crash. The ascent, the door slammed shut, sealing out the noise of the city and the pathetic sight of Preston Styles crumbling onto the wet pavement. The SUV pulled away smoothly, merging into the traffic, leaving the courthouse behind. Inside the vehicle, the tension finally broke. Eleanor Graves let out a loud laugh. "Did you see his face when you gave him the pen? That was legendary. I'm putting that in my memoirs." Timothy was already on his laptop. Stock for Stills Tech is plummeting on the rumor of the fraud investigation. By the time we land in Dallas, you'll be able to buy the remaining shares for the price of a used car. Brianna leaned her head back against the headrest. She felt exhausted, drained, but incredibly light. "So," Nathaniel said, opening a small refrigerator built into the console. He pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. Brianna didn't drink alcohol, and he respected that. He poured 2 glasses. "What is the plan, really? Are you going to run his company?" Brianna took the glass. She watched the bubbles rise to the surface. "No," she said decisively. "That company is poisoned. It's built on his ego. I'm going to strip it for parts, sell the patents, liquidate the assets. I'll use the capital to fund Ford Technologies." "And the employees?" Nathaniel asked. "I'll hire the good ones," Brianna said. "The engineers who actually did the work while Preston was playing golf. They deserve a leader who knows how to code." The car turned onto the tarmac of the private airfield. The Gulfstream G50 was waiting, its engines already spooling up, a silver bird ready to take them above the clouds. Brianna looked out the window. The grey sky of Seattle was behind her. Somewhere back there, Preston was realizing that his credit cards didn't work. Somewhere back there, Tiffany was probably deleting Preston's number from her phone. Brianna took a sip of the water. It tasted like victory. "You know," she said to Nathaniel as the car came to a halt near the jet stairs, "they told me I was nothing without him. I almost believed them." Nathaniel smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "The diamond doesn't need the setting to shine, Brianna. The setting needs the diamond." She smiled back. "Let's fly." They exited the car and walked up the stairs of the jet. Brianna didn't look down. She didn't look back. She looked up at the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to break through the storm, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. She had accepted the divorce with nothing. She was leaving with $1 billion future. And as the jet roared down the runway and lifted into the air, leaving the ground far below, Brianna Ford finally, truly, let go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how you handle a bully. Preston Styles thought he could crush Brianna because she was quiet, not realizing that the quiet ones are often the ones watching, learning, and preparing. He tried to bury her, but he didn't know she was a seed. Brianna didn't just win a court case, she reclaimed her identity. She turned her pain into power and her betrayal into a $1 billion empire. It's a powerful reminder to never let anyone define your worth, especially not someone who is intimidated by your strength. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Brianna was too harsh by giving him the pen and leaving him stranded? Or did Preston get exactly what he deserved? I read every comment, so let me know your verdict. If you felt that satisfaction when the judge dropped the gavel, please hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have a brand new story coming next week about a nanny who inherits a mansion and the family's shocking reaction. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, stay strong, and remember, the best revenge is massive success. See you next time.